My honors project on Mary Breckinridge. Her early life, Mary Breckinridge was born in Memphis, Tennessee on February 17, 1881, to Catherine Carson, her mother, and her father, Clifton Rhodes Breckinridge. She was the second of four children of a very prominent political Southern family. Her father served Congress as a representative from Arkansas and was a minister to St. Petersburg, Russia, and commissioner of the Indian Affairs. Now, the Indian Affairs was a federal agency that provided services and programs for the American Indian and Alaskan Native people. It is responsible for implementing federal laws and policies. Now, her father in 1900s, McKinley appointed him to a position of the Dawes Commission to the 5 civilized tribes in Indian Territory, with the responsibility of distributing individual elements of the tribal land to the Cherokee tribe. Breckinridge and other commissioners were charged with fraudulently acquiring Indian Territory in 1903, resulting in him leaving commission in 1905. Now, the Dawes Commission was a federal commission appointed by President Grover Cleveland in 1893 to negotiate with 5 civilized tribes in Indian Territory. Her grandfather, John C. Breckinridge, was vice president under James Buchanan. Really like fun facts. Mary learned how to ride horseback when she visited Oasis Plantation in the Mississippi Delta, home of her maternal uncles. This skill would later be vital for her nursing career in the future, because, in rural Kentucky, they mainly used horses to get in the rough terrain. She learned how to hunt and enjoy nature as a child. At the age of 14, during her youngest brother's birth in St. Petersburg, Russia, was her first encounter with a trained midwife that would prove to be formative in her vision of the frontier nursing service. Early education, Mary was taught by tutors but also attended private schools because of her upper class status. Since her father was a minister to Russia, she lived in Europe for most of her primary learning, in which she was educated in Lucerne, Switzerland, and attended Rosemont de Zayli. The goal for Rosemont de Zayli was so she can learn to speak and write with social grace upon marriage. Living in Switzerland grew her love for the mountains, which is why she probably lived in Hyden, Kentucky. Um, she later entered the Low and Haywood School in Stamford, Connecticut, where she then finished her secondary education in 1899. Living in the States was an adjustment to her social life. Nursing education. At the age of 23, Breckinridge went to St. Luke's Hospital after Henry Ruffner Morrison, first husband of 2 years, who passed away from appendicitis, and in 1910 she graduated and received her RN. Her career. In 1912, she remarried to her second husband, Richard Ryan Thompson, president of Crescent College and Conservatory for Young Women in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. In her first 2 years of marriage, she taught French and hygiene at the school. In her marriage, she had 2 kids, a boy, Clifford Breckinridge, who died at the age of 4, and a girl, Polly, who died a few hours after birth. After her children's death, she divorced her husband and took back her maiden name after the divorce was finalized in 1920. She decided to honor their memory by devoting her life to improving children's conditions. Her nursing career. After she left her husband, she went back to nursing and worked as a public health nurse in Boston and Washington, D.C. during the influenza epidemic. After the armistice in 1918, she then volunteered to go to France on behalf of the American Committee for Devastated France. Now, the armistice was an agreement to end the fighting of the First World War for peace negotiations. And the American Committee for Devastated France was a group of American women who volunteered to help the French Third Republic recover from destruction of World War I. During her time in France and England, she became convinced that the health of rural American children would benefit from the presence of trained midwives. Nursing career in Europe. While in France, she initiated a program to provide food and medical assistance for children under 6, nursing mothers, and pregnant mothers. Mary also worked with patients with pneumonia, impetigo, eczema, scarlet fever, and diphtheria. Breckinridge wrote to her mother often and stated that families would benefit from goat's milk, so her mother helped organize donors and establish a goat fund. After direct relief, the American Committee for Devastated France began to rebuild a public health system by studying the system in place before the war. Breckinridge played a central role as an administrator and began her work by studying the system in place. As she studied the system, she imagined what the system would look like for the Americans in rural America. With the data and records, she was able to use these for plans and ideas in her later work with the Frontier Nursing Service. When she would observe the trained midwives and nurses in Europe, she realized that the American health system was outdated and practiced like the medieval times. France would train midwives but overlook nurse training, and England trained nurse midwives who would best serve the needs of rural areas and communities in France and America. Mary devised a plan to establish a nursing school so that would work from visiting nurses service would carry on, but it was never established. Although her nursing school was never established, her efforts would later help her with establishing the Frontier Nursing Service when she returned to the United States. So she's back to the U.S. Breckinridge returned to Hyden, Kentucky in 1925 on May 28th of that year. Founded the Kentucky Committee for Mothers and Babies, which soon became the Frontier Nursing Service. She was joined by 2 midwives she met in London, Edna Roxstroh and Frida Captain. The Frontier Nursing Service would provide general health care, vaccinations, pre-postnatal care, and birthing services. Mary had a large log cabin in Wendover, Kentucky, which served as her home and the Frontier Nursing Service headquarters. Mary and her father, Colonel Breckinridge, took care of the horses, and nurses Edna and Frida set up the first nurses' clinic in 1925 and lived together in Hyden, Kentucky. Of course, being in rural Kentucky, the nurses depended on horses for transportation. Good thing she learned how to ride when she was little. This is Breckinridge's log cabin in Hyden, Kentucky. The Frontier School. In 1930, Mary worked closely with Ann McKinnon in setting up the Kentucky State Association of Midwives in 1930, which was the first association of midwives in the United States. Later down the road, with generosity of Breckinridge's investments, her inheritance, and many charitable donations, she established the Frontier School of Midwifery and Family Nursing, a first of its kind in the U.S. She continued to lead the Frontier Nursing until her death on May 16, 1965 in Wendover due to leukemia and a stroke at age 84. Upon her death, FNS had treated nearly 58,000 patients and delivered over 14,500 babies with only 11 maternal deaths. So why did she choose nursing? Although Mary had been raised in a prominent property-owning family, she often served people who lived in poverty. She would do this to follow the example of her great aunt, who they called Grandmother Lees. Her aunt would use her sources to provide for children in need and was also a very deeply religious woman, so Mary considered this path to be her life's calling. Honors, Breckinridge won the Harman Fenton Prize for Public Health Work in 1926. The National League of Nursing Mary Adelaide Nutting Award for Distinguished Service in 1961. She also received Medaille Reconnaissance reconnaissance Francis of organizing a visiting nurse association. In 1952, she was named Kentuckian of the Year. In 1995, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. And in 1998, the United States Postal Service honored her with a 77-cent Great American Series postage stamp. Are my resources. Thank you very much.